This is something that's not just a right, it is a duty. And if we do not perform our duty, we will lose the right. We are honored and very grateful to have him come down to speak to us. And I'm sure to most of you this man needs no introduction, but possibly there's somebody in here that doesn't know who he is. So I'm very proud to introduce to you Mark from Michigan. Mark Koernke. Thank you, sir.
Now, kind of throw something at me when it gets close to 4:30, okay? Just to be safe. Or you can give me a wink and a nod when the time comes. Well, first of all, good evening.
Good evening.
Come on, Florida, good evening. Good evening. All right. Well, of course, we are in the Republic of Florida. One day close to victory here in the occupied states. As you all know, we come from the Little Brother Information Network. Big Brother is watching, and Little Brother has a big mouth. Since the last time we were in Florida, and a lot of you met before, and some of you are very good friends, well, you know we've been traveling around the country. We've been blessed with the opportunity to meet virtually hundreds of thousands of Americans. Make no mistake about this. First of all, you are not alone. In fact, just the reverse. We've had meetings like this from Montana to California, from California to Albuquerque, New Mexico, Albuquerque. We've been, of course, in the Plain States, Connecticut, going to Pennsylvania next. Of course, all through Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, the Carolinas. In fact, we've been through probably about 42 of the states of the Union. And in each case, we find that America most assuredly knows that something is wrong. That is a fact. When I say occupied states, I think all of you understand that when we say that something definitely is wrong, we also know that we're going to have to come up with a solution. Well, one thing about the United States is we, the people, are the government. We may fall asleep every once in a while. Japan found out the hard way, and when the sleeping giant awoke, well, after about 5 years, they understood what it meant. The New World Order crowd was even working then, both after World War II and before World War II. And in each case, both before and after, it was their objective to try and convince you and me that we needed to surrender our sovereignty. That you as Americans didn't need to worry about being Americans. Well, that's kind of funny whenever I think about that, because number one, have you ever looked at the rest of the world? Why do you think they mimic us? Why do you think so many parts of this planet would like not only to be like us, but prefer to be here rather than where they are? There's a basic test about government. And to find out just how good a government is, if you drop the borders, it's to find out whether or not people run from or run to that country. Why do you think they're hanging on to most of the borders in Europe? And why does we have to protect our borders? There is a reason. Now, we've had a long-standing situation here with the New World Order crowd. Remember, they're not new by any stretch of the imagination. The New World Order was around at the end of World War I with the League of Nations. They helped to create World War I. In fact, it was probably the first of their fabrications on a grand scale. The objective was to manipulate the minds of the people and to get us involved in international conflicts. That was pretty hard to do when you think about it, because remember, one of the last things that George Washington warned when he left the presidency was, avoid foreign entanglements, for they shall ensnare you and sap you of your strength. What we see today is a progression down a long road of handing our sovereignty over and giving it more and more to a nebulous higher power that has nothing to do with our form of government. Fortunately, and thank you, Lord, and we better constantly thank the Lord for what's happened, because a series of men and women over the years stood in the breach. At different times, people have come awake and stopped, or at least slowed down to buy you more time. After World War I, the League of Nations was in full swing. People were picking the carcass that was known as Germany apart virtually across the world, and property and real estate was flying everywhere, being put under different empires, not under a new free state, simply different empires, taking pieces here and taking pieces there. Well, then came the big vote, the Senate and the House, as to whether or not we would officially join the League of Nations as a signatory. And because of a lot of men that had the intestinal fortitude to say no, and by only one vote, we stopped it. One. Had the New World Order succeeded at that time, and oh, they still had many successes, we would definitely not be standing here as we are today. We probably already would be in the woods and would have been fighting a long, protracted conflict. And some of us might not be here now. Well, because of that action, we came into and before World War II, we came into the Great Depression. And all of you who are old enough, and some of you were, as we say, the victims of it, so to speak, you survived and understand what the Depression was all about. Days with the same meal, or with no food at all, no work, no place to go because the rest of the country was identically in the same situation. And everybody looking forward to a time, hopefully, if they could rebuild, at least end up with something. Not much of something, but something that they could live in and keep the rain off their heads. The Great Depression was fabricated. I would not have said that before, and certainly would have said it 10 years ago, not completely, not the way I see it now. But the New World Order brought that into play. World War II, an extension of World War I, was the next step. At the end of World War II, with all the inter-cooperation, we came into the United Nations. The League of Nations revisited and reborn. Now, that blue rag that they created, many people sold their souls and should be cursed appropriately, and I'm sure in the infernal regions at this time, burning because of what they did, knowing what treachery they committed. But they sold their souls and then decided to come up with something called World War II and a half, the Korean War. The problem with that one was, if it had gone the way it was supposed to, in 1951, the war would have been over theoretically, and we would have been into another phase. But people, again, there were men and women in the right place at the right time who understood what was happening. Remember this, that the United Nations military forces have always been, are, and always will be under the command of a Russian general, period. That's part of the contract. And what does that mean for us? Well, I think that should be pretty obvious. What you're seeing now is a progressive surrender of our sovereignty and a transfer to foreign powers because we are a very dangerous force and they need to pull out our liberty teeth. That's what's happening. Well, Douglas MacArthur, a man that some people don't have a whole lot of use for, and you may not have liked him as a person, but because of a general by the name of Douglas MacArthur who did not report to the United Nations when he should have, his plans for the Incheon landing probably bought us another decade's worth of time. Because he didn't report to the United Nations, Russian generals did not observe our battle plans. Because those Russian generals could not pass on the information to the North Koreans, they and the Chinese and their Russian advisors were caught off guard. The rest is history. Well, we ended up in the North and South Korea. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. But they had to live with what was left. Notice we've come full circle, and on the anniversary of the United Nations, where are we having problems again? Korea. That is not an accident. I'll also point out something else. From the League of Nations to the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, every tool that they fabricated has now been broken or split asunder or has been fixed. Take a look at this. East and West Germany, they're together. What about Yugoslavia? A fabrication of the League of Nations? It's spread asunder. Czechoslovakia, another nation created by the League of Nations and the United Nations, is now split. Every country that they fabricated, those toys are being tossed aside. And if you look across the globe, there is but one now left, and it's being saved for the anniversary issue: North and South Korea. Now, why would they do that? Well, they enjoy symbolism. When I say they, I'll interpret very quickly what they means. The New World Order Internationalists, the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, take your pick of organizations. No matter what, they're internationalists, and we as sovereign Americans are a threat to them. Now, it is fascinating to me, and this is a little history lesson that I like to give you. I want you to go home and try this tonight. I want you, first of all, to redraw the map of Europe. Get into a history book that you've got that's laying around. Draw a map of Europe over a piece of paper with the new borders set up the way they are. With Yugoslavia split, Germany back together, Czechoslovakia split asunder. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are seeing is the Europe of 1914, as if the last 70 to 80 years never took place. What we're talking about is a reinstitution of what was literally monarchical Europe. And that has always been and will always be an enemy of this republic. In 1914, they decided to start playing the social engineering game, but they never really gave up any power at all. In 1995, the map has been redrawn back to where it was, as if they had never gone anywhere at all. And in reality, they had. But there's still a few game pieces left to play, because the Asian Rim is an important tool for the New World Order. I guess I have to ask you, who are going to be the policemen if we have only a one world police force? Who are going to be the soldiers if we have a one world army? And if they decide to make a little oopsie and butcher a few 100,000 or a few million people, I'll ask you this: who do you go to defend yourself? If the New World Order gets its way, if we just go by the enemy's rhetoric, if we just listen to what they have to say, we're talking one of everything. A deal only exists when there are two sides. If there is but one power, then you have what is called tyranny. The Founding Fathers warned us about this time and again and again. That's why they set up our checks and balance system. One thing I saw over here on our table that you better all have, and before you leave here, I better see you within your pockets, is a pocket constitution with the Bill of Rights and Declaration of Independence. You must be well-rounded patriots in this cause. Make no mistake about it, I'm a very adept soldier. But I also know for a fact we are going to win. And when we win, and when we throw the rascals out, and yes, there'll be a few tried, and there will be many that will probably be legally hung. Once we've won, what are you going to do with your victory? Once we have defeated this enemy, now mind you, there's a lot of space in between there, but you have to start planning now and come up with a solution to the problem that's been created. The whole of America was dumbed down. The North, the South, the East, and the West. And our generation right now is on the brink of what literally is catastrophe for the United States. If we do not move now, the next generation will be even more ill-prepared than we are. And I know that many of you are homeschooling. I homeschool myself. My family does. Many of you homeschool. I know that you're teaching your children well, but remember that at this time there are still many, many others who are not being taught at all about the history of this nation and about your heritage, what our country is about. We have to plan for the future. We have to look down the timeline and decide where we want to be with this country. And it can't be short term. We can't just look to the end of our nose. That's what the O.J. Simpson trial's for. That's what a lot of these other things are for, to keep us tied up looking just at the tree and ignoring the rest of the woods. Don't look around it. No, it's right here. It's right in your face. Well, that's the way basically the New World Order has been operating for a long time. Consider this. How many times have you been told, live for the day? You don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about the past. Just live for today. Right? Well, what else lives for the day? Cows live for the day. Pigs live for the day. Chickens live for the day. You know what else happens? They all get eaten. The only thing you can expect from the New World Order crowd is to be serviced. Anybody here in the cattle industry and know what servicing is all about? Yeah, somebody understands. Getting serviced is not your idea of fun, trust me. Well, with regard to the New World Order, they look at us as a usable resource. You and I are looked upon as something to be bartered, traded, sold, or transferred for power. A lot of you, for instance, and I don't want to see any hands, I did ask this yesterday, but I don't want to see any hands, but a lot of you have credit cards. Some of you have 2 or 3 credit cards. Some of you might even have 4 credit cards. Debt is pretty easy to access in this country, or has been for a little while, hasn't it? Do you think that that was an accident? We are the most heavily indebted nation on this planet right now. In fact, unheard of in the history of the world so far. At least documented. I think that a lot of history is being conveniently made to disappear. A lot of us here have maybe 2 mortgages on our homes. That's another thing that's really popular up north where I come from, is get a second mortgage. You need that extra money. What you're doing is you're buying your future. You're getting your future given to you at 1/3 its value or 1/4 its value because the interest kills, doesn't it? Now, the New World Order knows that there are many tools it has to use. The money change, some people ask us about this with the money change the last few days, and it's a common question. When we brought up the money change 2 years ago, we were physically attacked just about. Oh, you're crazy, that'll never happen, not in my lifetime, they'd never do it to us, those guys are Americans too. No, they're people who are ahead of you, they know what's going on the inside, and they plan on making a profit off us. Now, you've all seen the money change discussed in the national media, haven't we? There's not a person here who hasn't seen it in U.S. News and World Report, or talked about as a blurb on ABC, or discussed someplace in the media in the last 6 months. Now in banking circles, they're finally talking about an exchange rate. They wouldn't even admit to the fact 2 years ago the money was going to be changed, and we had the documentation on that. Now, they're trying to say there wouldn't be any exchange rate. The exchange rate is what will compensate the New World Order crowd for the debt that exists, because people are buying your debt on a regular basis. Let me give you an example to understand what this is about. How many of you had savings and loan accounts, say, 3 and 4 years ago? If you did, you'll recall that your bank, first of all, shut its doors. Then somebody else came in and bought the debt for 25 cents or 17 cents or 10 cents on the dollar. You know what? If you were paying on that loan, you still had to pay full price on that loan. I know a man right now who doesn't even know where his loan is on the house that he owns. Originally it went from Michigan to Ohio, from Ohio to Virginia, and a German company owns that debt now on a $34,000 home in Michigan. Now why do you suppose that happened? It was not accidental. Remember, there are some basic problems the New World Order is worried about though, and while debt is definitely being created and fabricated at a larger level, and the currency will change, there are some mistakes that they've made. With the currency and with the money situation the way it is, and I got to touch on money because it touches all of you. If they had an exchange rate, let me ask you this. I know everybody here's got debt, because I do too. Let's say that just in the next week they decided to halve the value of the American dollar. Could all of you pay all of your debts the next week? If you have 2 mortgages, does it make any difference which mortgage you default on? If you default on A or if you default on B, you lose the house. Now there's another basic rule about our national debt, which most people don't want to talk about, especially in government. But let's put it on a personal level. If you cannot pay And banks will let you do this for a while too, especially when you get towards depressions. You'll notice banks will become very negotiable now. They're going to start to talk more to you. Well, we'll wait a little bit. We'll give you a little more time. There's a reason. As things get tighter, they realize people don't have the money to buy whatever they confiscate. But let's say that you're the U.S. government. Right now, we can't pay the principal. We're not barely paying the interest, and very soon we won't be able to pay that. If you have a house and you can't pay for it for 6 months to a year, what happens to it? They take it away. If you have a car sitting out there in the lot right now and you don't make 3 months worth of payments on it, what happens to that car? They repossess it, or they send somebody else to repossess it, and the guy, of course, is just doing his job because he's paid well to do it. If a nation cannot pay its national debt, what happens to that nation? What does the debtor take as compensation? What is it you use as compensation? Physical, tangible property. Sorry about that. The fact of the matter is, physical, tangible property is all they'll accept. All these promissory notes, even the bills you have in your pocket right now, are nothing more than a promissory note or something else. Although the Federal Reserve note is backed by nothing, they will take everything we own if they can in exchange for nothing. The debt costs them nothing at all. They're collecting interest on it constantly. Now, for that reason, this is one of the tools that can be used to get into the United States. Historically, this has happened before on this globe and was backed by the League of Nations after World War I with Germany, with the Weimar Republic. When that took place, ladies and gentlemen, they sent military force in and put guns to the back of factory workers to make them continue to produce so they would get what they wanted out of the country in the way of a debt. They went into the mines, they went into the trains, they went into virtually all aspects of government and took it over because the League of Nations gave France an open-ended blank check to go into Germany. Period. Because they had a large national debt. And it wasn't even close to what we're seeing right now. Now somebody else asked me the other day, well, why would they let it go so far? What do you think happened to the American Depression? This is all important to history because you're living history right now. In the American Depression, some of you were alive, but you were children then maybe the oldest in your family. Some of you might have been old enough to actually be at the beginning of your family. It might have been just when you were married. The thing that saved the American people is that not everybody, Daddy, as we say, Daddy didn't raise no fool. A lot of men and women were very conservative and could see that the high times of the 20s weren't going to last. So they put their money together, what little they had. They did pay off their debts, and when the thing went through the basement, when the debt went through the floor, these people didn't do well, but they at least, first of all, kept their head above water, and then when everybody else needed money, they bought the town. The problem is, they weren't supposed to. This was supposed to be an international buyout of America. What was not expected is that the American people would have enough common sense to see what was going on, and they got there first. Well, this time around, that can't happen. Pay attention to what's happening right now. Anybody recently try to go to a bank and get a loan? Not a whole lot of fun nowadays, isn't it? The free money's disappearing. The easy money's disappearing. Your credit ratings are changing too. You're being reevaluated as a nation. You've already got enough debt. Well, there's an old rule. If it didn't work the first time, what they've waited is until most of the men who were first of all directly involved in the decisions that created the Depression, and second, to make sure the men who were involved in command and control, that were the lieutenants, that they've all passed and gone away. I know one or two that are in their 80s and 90s now. I haven't seen one gentleman for a few months. He might have passed away. He was a person who was in one of the biggest companies in New York, involved with the crash. He's an excellent teacher. He goes around the country and does just that, that we're talking about right now. Well, what he said is, people don't remember, so people can't figure it out. They're waiting because they want to be able to, the way I describe it is you pull a cartridge out that you've used before, blow it off, stick it in, turn the machine on, and this time you make corrections for your failures. This nation has been taken to the highest point in debt so it can be dropped in the deepest hole, and this time won't come out. When next we see the light of day, a different flag will fly over the United States. And that's only one of the tools that will be used, because remember, the American people are pretty resilient. And I don't care what kind of paper you have, there's another old rule that Daddy taught me long ago. Possession is 9/10 of the law. You can come with your repossession slip to try and take America, but as we know, here's the final tool that keeps the property. So what is the number one target of the New World Order right now? We know exactly what it is. The firearm. With our liberty teeth in place, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and with our personal arms, which are the other part of our liberty teeth, and with the militia, and with, yes, ladies and gentlemen, our active military personnel, our National Guardsmen, and our reservists, they cannot walk in unless we acquiesce and literally hand the thing over to them. Now, it's not the only tool that's going to be used. This community has had agricultural activity in the past, and I'm sure we'll have agricultural activity in the future. But I guarantee it's nothing like it used to be, is it? Anybody who's a farmer here knows who's been attacked primarily, and the farmer is the key to prosperity. There's a basic rule of the structural control of any people. He who controls the water controls the food. He who controls the food controls the people. Make no mistake about it. So those of you who are preparing must prepare and be a well-rounded patriot. Yes, we must have our weapons, and we must also have the capability to feed our people when the time comes. We must be prepared to support the farmers we do have that are still in place, and expand upon our agriculture for that reason, because he who controls the food controls the people. Ask any city and they'll tell you exactly how long they have where they cut the food off. How long would it take for people to come to their knees? Not long at all. Oh, I see you have an AK. Well, I'll feed your family for 3 days in exchange for it. You've got a neighbor. Tell me, I'll tell you what, since you brought that AK in, you must know somebody else who has a rifle. Just give me the name of another owner and we'll feed you for 3 more days. Oh, well, we might even let your brother-in-law out of prison. We might just do this. We'll offer you that. Remember that if you are hungry, you won't be thinking with this. People think with this. And this nation has been so well pampered that I do not think that many are prepared for the idea of hunger in the streets of America. That is one of the other punches that needs to be used. Notice I am not saying that one single action will work. It has to be 3. It has to be a 1, 2, 3 punch that hits this country. Just like any boxing or any martial arts activity, and you all know this, you ever been in a knockdown, drag-out fight, you always got that setup punch. Down, down, up. And he's dead. That's what you're looking for. You always have that little special blow you set up just for your own purposes, something that you know about nobody else does. Well, the New World Order is working that way. It is not one single action that is attacking this nation, but many. The schools, Project 2000, and an excellent speaker yesterday, a woman from your state. I highly suggest that you pay attention to what's happening in your schools and think. And if need be, yes, you're going to have to get actively involved in the community again. And I know a lot of us would think we got to back off. At the community level, at the township level, at the town level, you must be actively involved in government now. With the people I see here, you probably have enough votes if you got together and you're from a common area, you could decide who would be sitting in the seats. And I'm sure for every one I see here, there's probably 5 more, 10 more out there for every one of you. Now, in the same breath, I'll say this. No matter what we do, at some point in time, the New World Order is going to butt heads with us. No matter what level of government we finally take over, and no matter where it is we finally meet, it's going to happen. We can take back the townships. It's happening across the country. I've seen that. We can even take back the counties. You've got counties here in Florida that are directly supporting the militia. How'd that happen? What that means is that people are listening. What that means is not everybody's been completely won over by the crowd that's trying to take the country. But what it also means, we got to try a little harder, because there's some other counties we can take for little expense. That means the other side will have to fight that much harder to take it, or take it back when the time comes. But if it's at the township, or if it's at the county, or even at the state level, at some point the New World Order is going to decide that it can no longer take the chance, and we're coming together. That they can't let us go any farther because of victory. Whenever we play by their rules in courts, whenever we've done it on any other political battlefield, they have changed the rules, haven't they? To suit the needs of the New World Order. Well, a lot of you are wondering, and there's some photographs I have there on the table, that's why I'm being more particular about it, but we're going to spread out. Take a look at just a small portion of what we've collected. Out of Oklahoma City, for those of you, of course, who are a little too indebted, for those of you who, of course, are criminals, and that's all of you sitting here by the time the New World Order is done, by the way. I think you all know that. I guarantee I'm a criminal. That's simple. As an FBI agent said about 4 years ago, you know, we can find a person to put you at the scene of a crime. Yeah, I believe that. That could happen anywhere. Fact of the matter is, if you recall, the American Patriots that stood originally in 1775, they were all criminals. Every one of them, when they stood before God and made the decision to formulate the Declaration of Independence, and when they finally stood there, it is said that there was a dead silence. There was a hesitancy in the room. You could feel it. Everybody realized the point of no return had been reached. A lot of you ask me that even here today. At what point do we stop? At what point do we decide to put the brakes on these people and tell them no? Well, in 1775, first it started at Lexington and Concord, and then when the Declaration of Independence was put together, formulated, and in place, that dead silence was broken by the sound of pens scratching on paper. And every one of those men that signed that declaration knew that because of the laws of the land and the way they've been established, that most assuredly they could all die for what they'd just done. One rule stands true in the United States today, as it did then, that all of you would also better remember, no single one of us, not me, not this young man, or any of you standing here, could by themselves stop the New World Order. The only strength the American people have ever had is to come together as a group. That's the beauty of our nation. We can live however we wish. We can decide to set whatever path or go in whatever direction we wish, ladies and gentlemen. But at certain times we understand that if they can easily take from this man anything that he owns, it's only a matter of time before they come to me and do the same thing, or any one of you. We are allowed to be isolationists as need be, and also understand the need for the common good when the time comes, and right now the common good is totally threatened. In the 1700s, when the Declaration of Independence was put together and laid before these people, after they signed it, one statement was made which rings true today. Ladies and gentlemen, if we do not hang together, we shall most assuredly hang separately. Every one of us. And whatever pitiful wealth we have by comparison to these greedy buggers that are out there, whatever pitiful wealth we have will be taken and stripped from us because we are Americans. I don't care who you are, don't worry, they won't discriminate. In fact, we have another motto we like to use with the New World Order crowd: they eat their young. So even those who think they're special won't be around very long, will they? Well, in 1775, they were going after the weapons, and in 1995, it is very obvious they are again. And there's going to be some illusion of conflict for a little while, but you can already hear the rumblings that it's futile to resist and shall be absorbed. In the Senate, they're already saying they're not going to fight the assault man, are they? They're talking about it publicly. Mr. Dole said it would be useless because he just doesn't think he can get the votes. And of course, we're still looking at a presidential veto. Everything that was put into place against the will of the people will stay in place. It is the objective of the present parties that are in charge to buy time while they settle in and anchor all of the other resources they brought into this country. And it's only a matter of time before they get us involved in foreign wars and foreign entanglements and bleed our military white. And that's only a matter of time. We see it all over the world. What kind of people are they going to bring at us? We all have heard about Russians, Belgians, British, and we've seen some of them, and now they're being documented more heavily. But this piece right here, which if you want, we can access a copy of, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the IISS, publishes an annual report that is used and considered by most American media observers as their reference book. They reported that the Russian forces now number only, mind you, only 1,700,000 combat troops. However, the Frankfurt-based Institute for Soviet Studies, ISS, has also released their study that seriously contradicts the IISS report. The German-based ISS study reports that the Russian armed forces are twice as large as even the Soviet officially reported, 2,300,000 under arms. They break it down thusly. Russian Defense Ministry forces, 2,570,000. Interior Ministry forces, 370,000. President's Special Mobile Unit, secret police, 102,000. Border Guards, 210,000. Counter-espionage units, ATF, FBI, DEA types, 186,000 in uniform, ready to go. Catastrophe response units, FEMA police force type units is what we're talking about here, 310,000. Total uniformed personnel presently in inventory with the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation, Commonwealth, Republic, whatever term we're using this week, 3,748,000 personnel at hand. Our total combat strength of the United States military forces does not exceed 1,600,000 maximum. Of that, only 900,000 are actual combat forces in the United States, ladies and gentlemen, and most of them aren't in the country, are they? Now, a lot of us were told to go to sleep. The Russian bear doesn't know what he's doing. And in fact, don't you love the American media? No. I'm asking, yeah, I know, no, thank you. I love them. Where else can you have somebody invade somebody else's country, butcher men, women, and children, and have the American media writing articles where you're supposed to feel sorry for the Russian troops killing the men, women, and children? I ask you, talk about Orwell, 1984. However, that obviously tells us something, that the Chechens know how to kill Russians, right? I'd say so. In fact, Time magazine and the U.S. News and World Report did some very interesting pieces in which they were actually deriding. They were coming down on the Chechens. My goodness, they think they're worth 10 times any soldier on the planet. Well, considering what they just faced and who they just kicked in the mouth, I'd say that they are worth about 10 times any soldier on the planet, other than maybe ours. I'd be proud to stand beside many of these men that are fighting right now, because there ain't no doubt in my mind where they stand. They are willing to stand up for their women and their children. They are willing to fight for their homeland. Not only are they fighting, but they're fighting well. They don't have the resources we have. And what they're doing right now is, for some of you who are old enough to remember, what they're doing is they're giving their secret police practice for the day they will be set upon the globe. Somebody said, well, those troops are inexperienced. Yeah, some of them aren't, and now they're getting their experience, aren't they? This is just like the Spanish Civil War before World War II. They're testing new techniques, new technology, better equipment, and they're giving their troops the combat experience needed so that when they put them in the field, they will be battle-hardened. You will not be surprised to get them move down the street and watch the guy next to him watch his head explode and him fall to the ground. They've seen it before. That's why this is happening. There is method to madness. In fact, there is no madness involved at all. But remember, a Russian general and Russian military forces will always be a key part of United Nations control. And who are we surrendering our sovereignty to? United Nations. That's why we're dumping tanks off your coast here to make coral reefs, and the Russians are building more. Now, there's something that bothers me about that. We need also, by the way, here's a task for all you patriots here to spread this word. We need to know where those tanks were dumped. But they've done thousands of them already, not only off the Florida coast, but off the Carolinas, and also off New Jersey. National Guard units have had their M60A3 battle tanks taken away, put on flatbeds, taken out to the coast, and dumped in the ocean, not being given anything to replace them with. Any of you who are veterans, the M60A3 is a very familiar vehicle. It's also a very reliable vehicle. We probably got 20 years worth of spare parts sitting on the shelf in inventory in the United States. Armor doesn't deteriorate with age. We could just as easily park those things somewhere here in Florida in some dead government space. Could have put them in Alabama, could have put them in Georgia, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and they'd be sitting right there if we needed them if we have to go to war. Instead, what they're doing is fulfilling United Nations and State Department Document 7277, the systematic disarmament of the United States military for surrendering our sovereignty to a foreign power. That's treason and sedition. Thank you, yes. By the way, give those tanks to the militia, we'll show you how to use them. If your concern is cost, obviously we're a very efficient force. We don't get any paycheck, do we? We'll maintain the equipment. We'll keep it functional. In fact, we'll keep it more than functional. We might even show you that we will use it when the time comes. That's very important. That's obviously why they're trying to get rid of everything they can. But what they're replacing it with is Russian. And a lot of Russian material support equipment is being photographed, it's being observed. We are physically seeing it. We've had equipment running through Michigan. Some of you may have seen the photos. We had them sent to Spotlight, make sure they got to those people. They are being spread all over the country. We've got some originals with us here today. And it's not just in Michigan, it's not just in Florida, it's in every state of the Union. All over the country, people are seeing what's going on now, ladies and gentlemen. And a lot of people who have experience know that something is not right. Well, the secret police, of course, are not happy. And so it is only a matter of time before we start to see the next policing action take place. You are on the march. The empire is on the run. We are systematically working to organize all over the United States. We've seen a lot of good men and women doing hard at work, doing what they do best. And they can't stop. In fact, we have to double and triple and quintuple our efforts. We'll say this about the militia, though. How many of you a year ago expected to see what you're seeing now? Because I know a lot of people got a little tired. It was like they were talking to walls. We have to be patient in some cases. One of the fascinating things about the militia is we didn't geometrically expand like a pyramid. It was more like an H-bomb. The problem we have with most of the militias now is, and with most parts of the country, is we expanded so fast we're having growing pains. Now, one thing I'll ask, if nothing else today, is this. I've been involved in working with militia for at least the last 15 years. One form or another, and eventually commanding other militia units. If we have a difference, if there is a conflict, go back to remembering our common cause. And always remember this, that when fighting amongst yourself, the enemy chuckles in the background. If there's a conflict, always go back to reminding yourself of what our goal is. If there is a need for some change and you feel that that change is necessary, shake hands, step away, and perform the task in what you think is the best way, if need be, creating new units, because we won't have enough units organized for all the people that are coming in. Trust me on that. I've seen it already. And also because I want to have an insurance policy out there. I want to see the militia mechanisms, the Patriot Movement, still working in as many diverse ways as possible for our own safety's sake. I was on the other side. I worked as an intelligence analyst, and the one thing that I need in order to defeat you, if I were on the other side of the battlefield, is information on your consistent operations. Consistency kills. Change constantly. Come up with new solutions and be prepared to change yet again when the time comes. Keep that in mind. Once you can identify a pattern, you can come up with a solution. That's the job of an intelligence analyst. An analyst's position is then, once he figures out what the problem is, come up with a solution, demonstrate it to the people in charge, and show them how to execute the solution. And that term is correct, execute. We have to constantly be on guard. The militia is strong. Remember this, and it's a fact. I talked about this in American Peril, my position. We have 70 million firearms owners by what the NRA says, or the Gun Owners of America, or whoever. I personally think that as a worst case scenario, 6 out of 7 Americans will surrender their weapons immediately. Now don't be shocked at that. If you assume the worst, you won't be disappointed when you get better, first of all. But Daddy didn't train no fool. If you scratch out the new math policy that you were probably indoctrinated with back in the 60s, and think for a minute, 6 out of 7, eh? That means that 10 million Americans will stand by their weapons no matter what. And there is not a single military force on the planet that can deploy that many men anywhere. And we're already in place on our power base, well armed, well equipped, and we are ready to go. 10 million combatants minimum. Now personally, I don't think that's necessarily the case, because let me point out some things. Many people tried to play it safe 2 years ago or a year ago. But now you're seeing mainstream magazines in the firearm world talking about standing their ground. You didn't see that before, did you? In fact, people told us, well, if this was going on, we see this in this magazine, or we see this in that magazine. Even with the NRA, there is a division right now, because some people are trying to appease, and even I think Mr. Lapierre has made the comment that the purpose for our firearms was to protect against tyranny. In his last book, he made that comment. But people inside the organization are even against that idea. That was the sole purpose for our weapons, more so than anything else. To feed our family was a given. That was expected. That's God. That's normal for man. One of the few things, though, that we had as a right, still have as a right, will always have as a right, because it's a God-given right, is the capability to protect against tyranny when the time comes, to stand and say no.
Amen. Need a big gun.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Somebody told me, well, you know, what about those big rifles? I love it when they do a magazine article where they say, this is a grossly overpowered caliber, like 30-06. I love grossly overpowered rifles. I'm buying more every day. That's my first mission in life right now, is to make sure that my kids are as well armed as I am, and when I get them to a certain level, I'm going to do more. I'm going to make sure that they have everything I've got. And I'm buying as many new things as I can, so that when the time comes and I pass on, that they're just as well armed, if not better armed, because not only will they have the guns we bought, but all the other ones we picked off the Russians when the time comes. And I think there'll be enough to go around. Now that gets us to another point with the militia that I want to remind you all of again. And this group, of course, a lot of you are experienced. There is going to come a time when we are victorious. Be patient, first of all. We are not reactionaries. We do not react to anything. We respond to a problem. We think in advance. We are methodical. And we are the cold blade at night that strikes when nobody suspects. We're the people that take the T-72 after everybody stepped out to eat and doesn't come back. Remember that. At some point in time, you can only keep that cork in so long. Whatever's inside that hammer is going to come out because it stinks. Okay? That's why you must be patient. We do not expend our men fruitlessly. We do not waste resources. And eventually, because of that patience, we're going to be victorious. But when that happens, as I challenged before, you must be ready for victory. Even as we speak, there are people that are in the mind game of the New World Order that are trying to plan out what if we lose. In other words, what if we kick them out of here. In 1775, there were individuals who were planted by the king whose job it was to betray the Patriot Movement, and who did betray the Patriot Movement when the time came. That's why I say be flexible, be prepared, be ready. Even with those setbacks, we reorganized. Even with the problems that took place, we were able to stand again, and in Boston, we maintained the siege. Even after we won the revolution, though, the king's people were still here under the covers and trying to deceive the American people and put us back on a course that would hand us right back to the King of England. So as it happened then, it will happen now. And you must be ready to maintain your freedom when the time comes. As militia forces, you need no accolades. You don't have to worry about being patted on the back. If you want to find out what could happen to you, I suggest that you get a copy of the Guerrilla Warfare Manual for Special Forces and look at the last chapters. The first part of this book explains how to make guerrilla forces or how to make irregular forces. But the last chapter tells you how to get rid of them. Brothers and sisters, as patriots in arms, when the time comes, you turn to those men and women who helped to keep you alive. You honor the men and women who have fallen in battle. And you carry everything the way you can and bury it and go home. And when you get home, you scour the countryside and bury everything else you can get your hands on in the way of weapons. Because you're going to have to use them again. But whatever you do, pay attention to that last chapter, because this is a normal policy to make sure that the real patriots don't get in the way of whoever tries to take over. Number one, they bring you in and they feed you. Then they clean you up and bathe you and give you a nice place to sleep. Then they give you attaboys, accolades, fruit salad, awards. And then they identify you, fingerprint you, give you a card, and if you will not cooperate, they put you in jail. Now you best take a look at the manuals and read them all the way through. And remember that even as we speak, we must be prepared for treachery. It is our objective to survive and survive as Americans. And be ready for the next phase. As quickly as you win, and those battles will be chosen and have to be prepared accordingly, but as quickly as you win, we'll probably have to fight again. After the American Revolution, there was another battle that took place, a great war, another one not as long, but the War of 1812 within less than a generation. And right here in this state and many other parts of the country, they fought that war. In our own state of Michigan, we fought some of the biggest naval battles of that period of time. Victory-class tri-deck ships blew the snot out of each other on the Great Lakes. 119 fighting ships on each side were built during the winter, put into the lakes. They fought major naval engagements, sank each other. The next winter they built them again and went at it again. Every major land action that took place, we were in retreat. Our naval merchant marine was being sunk tonnage and tonnage and tonnage again. We had some great actions and we had some terrible defeats at sea. The worst part is this. They burned the capital of the United States. The nation was being run out of a carriage. Not any regular force could show any major military gains. Then towards the end, or what didn't know at the time was the end of the war, a crotchety guy by the name of Andrew Jackson out of Tennessee, and he promised to rout them out, and he did, walked and marched his forces, mostly militia volunteers, and men with their private arms, oh yes, and private cannon, by the way. Yeah, we had it back then. Worked their way to New Orleans and set up a combat line disproportionate to the situation at hand, when the British landed in force with two of the best prepared divisions available to them at the time. Fresh from the battlefields and victories of Europe, completely outfitted with the best technology and the best weapons available. And their casualty ratio was almost 6 to 1. They were slaughtered. Well, when we went back to the treaty for the Treaty of Ghent, we had a little different situation, a little different position. We could stand a little taller because of Andrew Jackson. So as he had to stand under the worst of conditions as Washington did, we may be in the same boat now. Now I hope it will be better, and I pray to God that we're given the benefit, but we're going to have to make sure that we allow for the fact we may have no resources but our own wit. And so we must prepare first individually. Every one of you who is a household family head, it is your responsibility to make sure that your porch is clean. Are you prepared to leave your home and your family behind and know that you don't have to constantly look over your shoulder? Think about that. There's going to come a point in time when wives, you're going to have to kiss your husbands goodbye, and they may not return. Men, there's going to come a time when you have to trust in God that your family is safe and leave them behind. you better make sure that your house is in order before you do it. Is your family fed? Are they secured? Are they protected physically? Have you done everything you can to educate? Have you done everything you can to make sure that those who are left behind are ready to stand in your place when the time comes? That is part of your obligation and responsibility as American patriots. So that when you walk away from the front door, when you leave to jump into that pickup truck or into that personnel carrier or just to march down the road, you're not constantly doing this, looking over your shoulder, worrying about what you left behind. You'll do enough of that anyway. You're going to have to be like iron. Ladies, you're going to have to be like steel. Because I know for a fact it's going to be hard to let the men that are with you go. We have a tendency not to put ourselves into a place of history and understand what it was like. Florida fought the American Civil War, farthest point away from what really was going on in the front, wouldn't you say? And yet many men walked halfway across this nation to fight those battles. We have an opportunity here because we are blessed with some prosperity still to prepare for the worst. We must prepare now. Now, we had an opportunity in the past. All of us, unfortunately, are also blamed for this. Every one of us, me, you, our fathers and grandfathers, maybe too. For years, I've had people tell me, Mark, when they show up on the shore, we'll fight them. Okay, they're here. Well, when they show up in my state, we'll fight them. Okay, they're here. Well, when they show up in my county, we'll fight them. Okay, they're in your county. Well, when they show up on my border, right here at my doorstep, I'll fight them. Oh, shoot. Well, if they don't take the beer and pretzels, I'll be happy and leave the TV. There's a lot of people thinking that way. As long as it's him or her that they're carrying away, it's okay. It's okay. After all, they wouldn't do that to me. Hey, what are you doing? Hey. Oops. That's the problem with the situation. But we must be prepared first at the personal level. You need to deal with that. That's one of the reasons. Chemical warfare protection. Yes, some people ask me, what do you think they're going to do? What did they do to the Davidians? They showed you exactly what respect they have for life and what their intentions are. Ladies and gentlemen, learn from the mistakes of the past. We have the opportunity to be prepared. It is a very simple process. And it costs so little. And we must be able to prepare all of us, including the children when the time comes. Another thing for you ladies, remember this. We may fall on the field of battle, and you must be armed because, remember, we're going to do everything in our power to chew them a new hind end. Those who are wounded, those who are behind for whatever reason, may be all that is left standing, but it is better that you be free than all of us be slaves. We don't have a choice in this. That's why it's important that you women that are left behind when the time comes, and I know there's some saying, I'm going to be up there fighting too. Ladies, I would ask that you not, but I understand if you do. I ask that you not because we are men of the West and we value our women and our children. We are not a pack of dogs. We are not a pack of animals. We are Americans. We have an ideal and we have a standard that we have to live by, that we're trying to maintain. We hold all life precious, even that of our enemy, to a certain extent, for we will have to temper justice with mercy. But most importantly, we would try to shelter whoever we can from what we are going to see. And we really do have a purpose in life, and that is part of it. That is why we were made men. It is one of our tasks when the time comes. We are the shield of our families. You are going to have to make the proper decision when the time comes. But ladies, if we do fall, it is your job to be the historians. Even if we survive, you will have to keep the records, perhaps, to remind our children and our grandchildren why we stand and are willing to do what we are doing right now, and why we will do it in the future. Because eventually we pass this nation off to the next generation, which is another warning also to every one of you sitting here. I've seen many organizations come and go for one reason and one reason only, to become cliquish by age. We must have the young involved with the old and the middle to manage everybody when the time comes. We must be involved together. Do not separate or isolate people because of age, and especially do not exclude your children if at all possible. It isn't going to be long before they're the same height you and I are, and it doesn't take long before you find that they've got children of their own when the time comes. Somebody asked me this a couple months ago, and so it's something I always remember, is how can we secure freedom for our children and for our grandchildren? How can we promise that to them? You can't. You can't promise the next generation anything. The only thing that you can all hope is that being good patriots and doing what you've done so far and doing better still in the future, that to that young man there and to the other young ladies and young girl that's here, when they're our age, they make the decision properly to be free rather than slaves themselves. That's one of the hardships of being in a republic. There's a four-letter word involved. Work. W-O-R-K. It's a dirty one, isn't it? But it's also one that we have to take advantage of. In order for this nation to survive, we are going to have to maintain a vigilance. We are going to have to be free. And that requires a great deal of effort on the part of all of us. These young boys here eventually are going to be gray-haired just like many of these grandfathers. Somebody asked me the other day, and I emphasize this one, as a key point, all of us affect the history of this nation. Not just one person standing here, because any one of you, and I challenge you because I've seen it today, any one of you can be here doing this, what I'm doing right now, and in fact, all of you should be. If we'd done more of this, and we moved a little more hot air when the time came, ladies and gentlemen, we might have buffered this or slowed this down, or maybe even stopped it. Maybe. It's still going to have to happen, and you're still going to have to stand up at times, and you're going to have to stand in the breach because nobody else is going to do it for you. Have you found somebody else that values your freedom more than you do? I'd like to know them. You got somebody else that thinks that your time is more precious than theirs? I don't think so. You're going to have to stand up for yourself someday when this takes place. And because of that, and because of the question, how do we affect time, or how can we affect the nation? Well, many of you here right now, and a lot of you are gray-haired, I can see, many of you remember your grandfathers. How many of you were taught by your grandfathers? How many of you learned something from them? Were educated? How old was it when your grandfather passed away or your grandmother passed away that you can remember? And how old are you now? Some of you are in your 60s or in your 70s. How many of you have grandchildren that are already 10, 15 years old or 20 years old? Just do some simple math and look at the amount of time that you've touched. Every one of you, if you do well, when this young lady has grandchildren of her own, will touch more than 200 years of American history. Every one of you. From the past, you've already seen back into the early parts of the last century. Into the future, you're going to look into the year 2000 plus. If you don't think you affect the future of this nation, you better think again. They've always tried to belittle our importance, especially with tyrannies like socialism, fascism, and communism. The individual is not important. The individual is very important, and they know it. That's why they've always tried to stomp them flat. George Orwell said something that was most important. In the book 1984, most people miss this, and they intentionally misquote it constantly, even when they did the movies for the big screen. Big Brother is not fascism. Big Brother is not communism. Big Brother is socialism, stretching on for as far as the eye can see. Imagine, if you will, a boot on the face of humanity forever. That's the best description I can give of what you face. I'll go one step farther, though. I'll say this again. Socialism is not their final goal. It may even be the term they use. But what you're looking at are the same enemies we faced 200 years ago, the monarchists of Europe. And there's some monarchs in Asia, too. And probably a few who think they're even royal blood here in the United States. Make no mistake about it. We face the same aggressor over and over and over again, so we get to make a decision on that. The decision rightly should be freedom. When you leave tonight, and when you go home, I want to ask you something. We're all taught to think short term, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year out. That's long-term planning nowadays. We think about a mortgage in terms of 20 years maybe. But I've got to ask you this, where do you want this country to be 10 years from now? Free. 50 years from now, when these young ladies are gray-haired, where do you want this nation to be? Free. 100 years from now, and yes, I know probably most of us will probably be gone, as a legacy to the United States and to the people of each one of these republics, where would you like to see this nation? Free. Thank you. Completely. To do that requires that four-letter word again. We've got to roll up our sleeves and get to work. There's a lot of good men and women that are organizing. I am very satisfied with what I've seen. I'd like to see a lot more. We put 200% effort into this. I ask only that you do 100%. How do you like that? That's not hard. What it means, though, is that we're going to have to commit ourselves, and for a long, long time. If you think it's going to be easy, or if you think there's a magic silver bullet or one single action that will get rid of the problem, trust me, it doesn't exist. It is not there. In fact, it won't be silver. It's probably made out of lead, antimony, and tin. That'll be the final problem, the final solution. We'll deal with it when the time comes. And a little copper jacket, probably, too. That's true. Because of the problems that we face, though, we are going to have to move quickly, and we're going to have to move honestly. There's not a person here that I would not stand with. And I don't know half of you. The mistake we made with the Weavers in Idaho, who I didn't know, either at the time. In fact, it was one of the areas where we were being awakened to what's happening across the country. And also with the Waco situation with the Davidians, who again we didn't know personally, taught us a great lesson about apathy. A lot of us watched for 51 days while they laid siege to a home and a church, not a compound.
It won't happen again.
That's right. With God as our witness, there will be no more Wacos in the United States. We have to be ashamed for that. I asked Texans when we were there the last time. In fact, it was an interesting effort to make sure we didn't get to Texas for the anniversary. But one of the questions I asked in a meeting like this was, what happened at Waco? And everybody's eyes just fell to the floor. And I asked it intentionally, and I wanted to drive it home. And if I were with the Texans, even now, I'd probably still do the same thing, because I want them to remember this time. They will not let it happen again. They are grievously sorry. They are ashamed. They can't look you in the eye at first, because they know just as well as we do that they were the first line of defense. And all of us had the same attitude. All of us were lulled by the stink. All of us. Oh, somehow they're going to come out of there. It's going to be peaceable. They butchered these people on national television. They burned them and poisoned them. Men, women, and children. Now, for anybody you want to give as an argument, I've heard people say, well, they didn't learn it, na-na-na-na-na. Oh, they got what they were supposed to get. A lot of the people you're going to talk to are our age. Some of you are Vietnam veterans here. Some of you are Korean, some World War II. Let's take you back in history, something most people don't want to think about, but the leftists made a point of driving into us, especially during the Vietnam War when it took place. My Lai. Everybody remember it? It was called the My Lai Massacre. Lieutenant William Calley, of course, was held responsible along with the officers over him and NCOs underneath in a war halfway across the world in what was called a free fire zone. U.S. forces obviously committed what was a crime. The officers and the NCOs and the men in charge were brought before the mass. They were brought up on charges immediately. They were punished, and many were put in jail, though some not probably were punished where they should have been. But they still were brought before the mass immediately. There were charges, there were courts, and most assuredly it was spread all over the media that this was the worst thing that could possibly happen in the history of the nation. The same people who protested the My Lai Massacre, ladies and gentlemen, are the ones who ordered the Waco Massacre. I got a problem with our enemy with consistency, or the lack thereof. Waco was not a free fire zone. It was not a war zone. It was not a situation where soldiers were sent where they didn't want to go, where they shouldn't have been because it was against our honor. Instead, it was in the United States of America and the Republic of Texas, and these were men, women, and children who were Americans, and they were slaughtered with reckless abandon, and not a single man has been brought up on charges or gone before a court where you and I could judge them for these crimes against the American people. Not one in 2 years. We know what you get in the way of a reward for that too, by the way. You just heard it on television. You get a letter of reprimand and a promotion for killing babies in the United States. From the ATF or the FBI, it makes no difference. Oh, and if you're really good and you can shoot mothers that are nursing babies, you get a letter of reprimand, a vacation, and a higher promotion. Those are your government employees that you are facing now. Think about it. The ski mask. There's pictures here, and it still bothers me every time I see it. And there's an excellent piece that was given to me. In 1975, if we saw a man in a ski mask, he was a terrorist, and we shot his hind end. In 1995, he's a federal employee, and you're supposed to say thank you. He's still a terrorist. For all of the situations that we've experienced, this, as much as anything else, should slap everybody in the face, and yet a lot of people are totally brain dead. Because of gradual conditioning. Bad boys, what you gonna do? Well, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do when I see them. I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind. But the fact of the matter is, this is the kind of thing they're promoting, the live entertainment. Let me warn you about something that goes along with live entertainment like that is the next one that's already being seen in place are video courtrooms. Have you noticed that starting to come up on TV and cable now? Video court. And they get to teach you how to be a little video courtroom professional. Well, what's the problem with that is you see right now they're starting to tell people, first of all, we have motor voter registration now, right? You only have to show up, don't have to prove who you are. Basically, if you got a driver's license and doesn't make it as a part of the world you're from, you can vote in America now. There's something wrong with that picture right away. Well, let's go one step farther with the courts. If right now we have television court, eventually, just so that we don't have to pester all of you people from losing work and, going away from your home and missing the football game or something, well, we're going to have video courtrooms. Now, what's wrong with that picture? Pardon the pun.
Don't face the accuser.
That's right. You don't face the accuser. And another interesting twist to this is, what about evidence? Do you think that everything that's on television is real? Thank you. What did the FBI agent say 4 years ago? If need be, I will put you at the scene of a crime. I will find the person to put you there. Now, the worst thing they could have possibly let Hollywood do is what they most recently did, and that's to produce a movie to show you just how good they've become. Forrest Gump. I know that Gump was a real movie. I saw him shake hands with 3 dead presidents, didn't you? He met Elvis. And I saw it on the big screen, and it looked just as real as if I was standing right there. In fact, it was impossible to tell the difference. Now, if I can Gump-size you with Hollywood, what do you think I can Gump-size you with a video courtroom? I can put you at the scene of a crime. And all it takes is the right conditioning to cycle people into this, to continue to be lazy. Another dangerous thing, and you're seeing it was on CNN headline news last night, we've been warning people, pay attention, international courts, ladies and gentlemen. The king used international courts before 1775 so that when somebody like me or any of you stood up and did something like this, they would grab him and drag him to another part of the world to be tried by his peers in Jamaica or Canada or Africa or England. What's wrong with that picture? You take him to where you know you're going to get a conviction is what it's all about. Well, we seem to forget that we're seeing everything from the past regurgitated again. They're taking everything that's part of our heritage and turning it on its head. That's what this is all about. Well, the world court is being talked about more and more. If you do not think as your enemy does, you are going to be doomed to failure. Understand and use his dictionary whenever you're dealing with problems. If you're with the world court, do you think right now if I sent you to Mogadishu in Somalia that we're enamored there with the people of that nation? Think you get a fair trial? Don't you think there's some Somalis right now who'd love to have you in a courtroom so they can roast your hind end? I guarantee they get a conviction every time. All they'd have to do is tweak the right nerves of the right population group. I mean, I'll go one step further. They don't have to be that fancy. Let's go to France. The French love us, don't they? Anybody who's been in the military knows better when I say that, especially if you spent any time in France.
Hallelujah.
So for that reason, again, like I said, this is not an accident, and it is a direct threat to you and your children. They will find a court as necessary. They will have what is called the color of law, but not the substance of law. That is a direct threat to our freedom. And again, it's something we're going to have to pass on to our children to understand and recognize very quickly. Do I think that they will get away with this? Well, no, not in the long run. But I also didn't think they'd get away with burning down an entire small community in the United States and killing women and children on TV. I figured that would be about the time that this nation would cook up. Now, I talked one of the last times that we were down here, I talked, in fact, with a couple of the Davidians, got a chance more time with one and the other. One of the comments that was made, and he was nervous, one of the things that he said was, well, we can't really wish these people back to life. We can't bring them back in time. But the fact of the matter is, we have to look at the situation this way. Some good did come of it. It awoke the American people. The New World Order is still paying because of it right now, in that their credibility, that our belief in them is slipping very, very rapidly. As each step comes into play now, as long as you are bold and speak out, you can show people what is wrong with the situation. You can demonstrate to them exactly where they're going with this. When I said compound earlier, I meant that to show you something that most people seem to ignore is programming in America. Don't think you can't be programmed. That was the Davidian church. That was a home. And yet I had to slap myself silly for days on end every time I said it because I started using the word compound. That's right, wooden compound. Yeah, one heck of a fortress burned down in a heartbeat. I didn't see any sandbags, and there wasn't a whole lot of cement. What's fascinating is, again, it was done so gradually that none of us immediately caught on to it, but we had to stop and think because we started to use the enemy's terms. Whenever that happens, you've got to stop and grab yourself by the throat and choke it out of you. I will never let that happen again if I can at all. But it means work and effort. I've got to think. Do we believe that the media is going to be friendly in the future? Well, obviously, I don't think so. The militia is being attacked everywhere they can, isn't it? Everybody watch the Donahue show?
Yes.
Ah, wasn't that an interesting piece?
Oh, he got his lunchy.
Huh?
He got his lunchy.
Yes, that's right. Interestingly enough, the Donahue program is probably the best example. After the horse was out of the corral, they were trying to close the gate. Even the New World Order media crowd does not fully understand how deep and how far the Patriot Movement has gone and how broad our foundation. And so many people after the Donahue show, many Patriot groups, had hundreds and thousands of calls. How can I join? Where do I go? What do I do? Obviously something is wrong here because when Phil Donahue doesn't like it, there must be something good. And that's a fact, it's true, but it didn't even need Phil Donahue as a litmus. He just kind of helped fan the flames. Probably the best example is that during the show, when it was filmed, contrary to what you saw, there were a lot of people in the audience that were pro-militia. If you got that thing taped, I want you to watch and pay attention as to how they engineered it and how they cropped the photos. After the program, a good portion of the audience stayed and walked up and shook hands and hugged the people that were there and asked how they could join or organize the militia. You didn't see that on the Phil Donahue show, did you? There's a reason again. And in fact, Phil was a tad bit agitated. At the end, one of the comments was made, and I wish I had JJ or one of the other guys here to talk to you, because one of the things he said after the program, he came up and he spoke to me, he said, I knew I was in trouble when you guys finessed the first two questions. And from that point on, they did not get what they wanted.
You
catch how they misquoted the Second Amendment. Thank you. That was a good point. I'll bring that up too.
In the caption underneath, individual how they plan to attack the government.
Yes, the continued innuendo about it was a battle against the government of the United States. They were going to do war against the government. First of all, playing on the ignorance of the people, we are the government, first of all. We're daddy didn't train no fool. And second, of course, this whole point, when they were on stage, the men could not see the monitor, in which they left out the right of the people. Now that's very important, and don't tell me that Phil Dunning's people are stupid or they made a little oopsie, because just before this program had gone on, they had just done an anti-gun program with Mr. Schumer on. And we have that tape in which he was showing everybody the National Firearms Owner's ID card. It's such a little piece of plastic. Why would you be afraid of it? We all know what it means, don't we? That's tyranny. Well, the fact that he left out the right of the people and also reconfigured the Constitution should tell us just exactly what kind of respect Mr. Donahue has and the networks have for the Constitution in general and the Bill of Rights. Whenever we see we the people, and for those of you who do have your pocket constitutions, or if not, like I said, there's some here, open it up and take a look at the Bill of Rights. Wherever we the people are involved, it has nothing to do with government, that is us. The people as a whole, not just the state government or the federal government, but us. Why would they want to give the state the right to free speech? Why would you give the state the right to protection of trial? Instead, it went to the people as a whole, all of us. Those are our rights. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And for those who wonder about the well-regulated part, first of all, well-regulated as in making sure you had a minimum amount of equipment, not a maximum amount of equipment. At the time, one of the problems they had with the people in general was people get lazy. That's the typical nature of human beings. And so it was expected that a minimal should be maintained even by those people who felt they did not want to participate. A minimum of a firearm and 100 rounds of shot and powder should be maintained by each person who is of age in the community. All individuals within a specific age were part of the militia and still are. Yes, even the women are included, but I'll say again, ladies, I value your lives because we must preserve you. There is a purpose for both of us. And again, the men have a job to do. Let them do it and do it well. These little bits and pieces that they would like to exclude, of course, are done a piece at a time. And like picking at a scab, eventually they can get us to bleed. And if they had their way, it would flow freely, and we would bleed to death. Our freedoms would literally trickle out of 100 different wounds that we'd be committed against the Constitution and Bill of Rights. We have to stop that at all costs. I will say this of that program, by the way. Were anybody to do that, and especially if it can be proven intentionally, that by itself is an act of treason, or at the very least an act of sedition, because they intentionally altered the words and meaning of the highest document in this land short of the Bible. And that is definitely something people should be punished for. The only thing I can see worse is, well, not worse, but comparable, is voter fraud, per se. We're worried about voting, but we aren't sure exactly where those votes are going when it's being electronically told. And so these are things that we're going to have to look forward to in the future correcting. For people stacking the ballots and for people altering votes, that is a high crime, or should be a high crime. For people trying to alter it. And it's the same with rewriting the Constitution without asking. Nobody asked us. Those are the people you have to go to. We the people. Well, it's been a long road, and it's a far cry from, actually, it's kind of funny what my father said. He was down at the other meeting, by the way, and before we started a tour that we did where I met many of you a little under a year ago, actually almost a year ago now, one of the things he said when I came down to visit, he goes, well, Mark, you speak to more than 15 people nowadays? What he was referring to, and a lot of you might have seen this, of course, was the American Carol tape, the first we did 2 years ago. And I must understand that was supposed to be a private taping just to get information out. When people started to find out and attended, And I've had a lot of people question when the camera, which we would never do, swept across the audience. There were a bunch of people trying to hide their heads and cover their faces. I think you've seen that before. They weren't exactly planned. They're just people who happened to show up and by word of mouth kept coming. Yes, we do speak to a lot more than 15 people, but it wouldn't make any difference if there were only 15 people here who would speak. It doesn't make any difference how large the group is or how small. You're all precious. And all of you have to start thinking that way too. With 15, each one of these people can go out and speak to another 2 or 3 people each. Your numbers might at least double. Then double again. Then triple again. Then quintuple and sextuple and 20tuple, whatever it will be. The fact of the matter is, that's exactly how this Patriot Movement got into motion. We escaped the watchdogs in the media too, who were supposed to try and crush any resistance by ridiculing anybody who might go to them to get the message out. We don't need the regular media, we have our own. And one of the best mediums we have is people talking to people. That's also priceless and rare, and that's been happening in this country for a long time. It's going to have to start again. We're going to have to start talking to each other so that we make sure we put a chain on this beast called government. Behind me, and I see it's rightly unadorned, thank you for whoever put this up, that is a constitutional flag. That's a flag of these United States. It is not adorned with a gold braid, therefore it is a flag representing directly the Constitution and the Bill of Rights of this nation, your document. We do not bow down to any king or queen in this land. There is no one that we bend our knees to except God himself. But remember, and remember always, that that is your symbol. If they take it away and try to put one of those blue rags up, we have to be there to stop it before it gets started. Most of you may have heard about the series of flag protests because of the UN flag raisings across the nation. There are a lot of little battles that took place. In Michigan, they did raise the UN flag for about 15 minutes, but it didn't stay up. And for people who said there was only 150 people or 20 people or 30 people or 60 people that showed up, it's on videotape. There were thousands that showed up. And they chanted and they sang songs, of course, of our nation. And the police, of course, were there in mass. And they had the 3 busloads of obligatory little kids who didn't know why they were there. And when they set everything up, they marched 5 young boys out in UN uniforms. And had another man come out with the UN flag who was an American Indian. And I don't think he knew that he wasn't being honored by the other side, they were just using him. And we talked to him, many of the other patriots did. Well, some people said it didn't make a difference because they got the flag up. Well, they took it down, so it didn't make a difference. But what was interesting is we did, as patriots, make a difference at that meeting like many others, because the little kids that were there weren't told how they were being used. They were simply being indoctrinated. And a lot of cranky patriots showed up with their kids, and we had people who weren't even part of the plan. People just spontaneously grabbed American flags. People who were walking by joined in this protest against what was happening. And the cutest thing happened. They decided to start to raise the UN flag. When it got up, the patriots started chanting, "Take it down, take it down." Of course, they were getting the riot police ready because one way or another it was going to be taken down, I'm sure. Well, while this was happening, the little kids who were up front, who were all standing here, were kind of paying attention to the adults. And they kept looking back at them, and all of a sudden, this one little kid in the front turned his back to the flag the way everybody else did and starts going, "Take it down, take it down." It gets better because the teacher looked over and ran over and grabbed the kid and tried to turn him around. Well, by the time she turned him around, 3 more turned around and started chanting, "Take it down, take it down." And then 4 more, and 3 more, and 2 more, and they were so busy trying to turn him down around, they couldn't do it fast enough, and all of the kids turned around, faced away from the flag, and were following the patriots who were there by example.
Boy, they got that.
Oh yes, I'm sure they did.
Did the teachers ever join them?
The teachers were helping them to participate in this. The teachers were the ones directing the UN activity.
Well, this is one that wouldn't.
Thank you.
Turn around and help them.
At that UN activity, I'll give you an idea. A nephew-in-law of mine was there with a big bundle of nice American flags. And when the kids came off the buses, he walked up and he wanted to give each one of the kids a small American flag. And the teachers jumped between him and the kids and told them they couldn't have that flag here. He said, oh, okay. You won't let us give them an American flag. No, that's not why they're here. So he walked over to the building where they had to go in, and he laid the American flags out on the ledge next to the door. And every one of the kids that went through the door got an American flag anyway. Good job. Huh? I understand the Gainesville United Nations flag was torn down. Yeah, it's down. If it's back up, then obviously sometime this week, I would assume it will be down again. You can collect them and date them, it's like, postage stamps. I got this one on the 19th, I got this one on the 26th, I got this one on the 29th. I mean, eventually what's going to have to happen if it's required of us, as I recall, it would be a misdemeanor. And personally, I think maybe that's what we're going to have to accept. Although, if it's done quickly enough, nobody will know what happened and there'll be nobody to catch. Personally, that may be what's necessary. But the important thing to remember is this, as with this meeting that took place in Lansing, those children will remember that action for as long as they live. Because patriots actually stood where they needed to stand when the time came and faced the enemy head on. That doesn't mean we can all do this, but it means a good percentage of us are going to have to at different times confront them directly and challenge them and say no.
We will.
That's what's going to have to happen. And don't think it doesn't work because, like I said, think about this. Those kids will remember that somebody actually had the intestinal fortitude to stand up. And even though they may have been shuffled away in the little school buses when they were done, people were paying attention. The media, by the way, of course, did everything they could to ridicule the people that showed up, as if they were threatening the children. Of course, the children were all they're worried about. Janet Reno only went to Waco for the children. In reality, all she wanted was little girls. Yeah, and then we'll know how to deal with her when the time comes, too.
What about that flag in Missouri?
United Nations flag in Missouri at the Truman Library. It actually was brought to the attention, thank you very much, it was brought to the attention of the American people in a small blurb in USA Today, and it was covered in the national or the state section. There's been no more word on that, although by what I understand in talking to them, and I believe that some of our people have spoken to them also, the library has received numerous complaints. And in fact, they're receiving calls constantly. If you listen to us, we might let everybody know, we've done this in the past for other events, perhaps it's time to shut down their phone net for a week or two with a call-in program to that particular facility. They will...
They said that someone stole it.
Better still, obviously. That's good. Oh, the rumor is that somebody stole it.
Yeah.
Well, heaven forbid, I can't imagine who might have done that. That's an example of Patriots in motion. There's a bumper sticker that I picked up in the last couple of weeks, and I guess maybe that's the best example of what you're seeing here with the UN flags or anything else. The bumper sticker is very straightforward. It says, "It's time for another tea party." And we aren't serving biscuits with this one either. If that is the case, and in fact, I think you will see this is going to be consistent, Patriots on the run are going to be a regular thing. I don't mean running from, but running to an event and dealing with the problem accordingly when the time comes. I will remind you about the UN flag, something that was found out by Patriots in New York. We're going to have a UN flag burning before the United Nations building very soon. if you're going to burn a UN flag, remember that one of the rules with regard to fabricating UN flags is that they be flame retardant or fire resistant. Now, in New York, for instance, they found out they could not use an accelerant like gasoline or kerosene, but they found out if you have the thing dry cleaned, it burns real good. Then they burn, well, that's the next option. But at least with the UN flag, remember, of course, again, as a little trick, if you're worried about the thing burning properly, and you don't want to necessarily catch the neighborhood on fire, unless it is the UN building, have the thing dry cleaned. It'll do a fine job of taking off all on its own. And it's the appropriate flag to burn, not this one. I've also said before at every meeting, by the way, but remember that when the judges told you they could take that flag and burn it, they were laughing all the way to their chambers. They knew what they were doing when they approved it. You weren't throwing an insult to the U.S. government because we are the people. We, the people, are the government. And that flag is our property, not the federal government's property. For that same reason, we make sure that if somebody tries to burn that one, we protect it accordingly too. And that is a Patriot's job. If we have to, we'll save it and then properly preserve the flag and dispose of it accordingly. But we don't let that flag burn. And I see another good flag here, a flag of your republic, the state of Florida. And that should fly proudly too, and make a point of showing it wherever you can. These 50 independent republics are the reason we're still free. We've got to make sure that they're maintained when the time comes. Regional government is encroaching upon us in all directions. And in fact, we've never voted for a regional director or a regional governor in our lives. And yet they affect every part of this nation every day. Every day. They are a government behind the government, and if they ever get rid of the republic, and if they ever destroy the states, that is the first mechanism they will turn to in the early stages as they hand sovereignty over to the United Nations. The New States of America documents are probably available here, the new Constitution as they're calling it. You'll notice that people are calling for some interesting things right now, aren't they? Bill Clinton talking about the new middle-class Bill of Rights. I thought we all had a Bill of Rights. I don't think we need to have a special or separate document for this group, that group, or another group. It is consistent for all of us. But why is he offering this? Why is he making these statements and these comments? It's not an accident. They're directing our mind again, pointing us in a direction we don't need to or want to go. But they're setting the stage. How many times have we heard that that Constitution is an old thing, it needs to be gotten rid of? It's dusty. Those guys are old, and those people are 200 years dead. Those men, 200 years dead, reach out from the grave and are effectively grabbing our enemies by the throats on a daily basis and keeping them in line. They don't know what to do about them because they were so far-reaching, they were so far-thinking. Consider this. Toys have not changed. Those lights aren't oil lamps anymore, but they basically perform the same mission. The toys outside, instead of a horse in front, we got horsepower under the hood. But the chairs, the way we put on our pants, the fact that we're still people just as we've always been people has not changed. When the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they understood exactly what they were dealing with and who they were dealing with, people. And people consistently will become lazy. People will unfortunately forget their heritage. They set up all the tripwire, all the booby traps they could. The checks and balance system was not designed to stop anybody, ladies and gentlemen. It was designed to let you know they were coming. And if at any step of the way you saw the flag go up, your job was to be there as the rifleman, as the patriot, to stop it before it got started, to be the infantryman in politics, to be the infantryman in the nation. That's the best way to describe it, to be there when the time comes. But like barbed wire, all it does is slow the enemy down. It does not stop them. If there's no one there behind the barbed wire, it does no good whatsoever. And so our Constitution at this time is in the same peril that it was, or our nation was, in 1775. All the flags have gone up. We've all been warned time and again of what actually is taking place and how bad things are. Yes, bad. Those opportunities are failing right now. They're slipping through our fingers if we don't pay attention and act. And as I said at the very beginning of this, do you honestly think the next generation will be better prepared than you are when the time comes? We are the nation's last best hope at this point in history, at this point in time. If all of you fail us, men of the Republic, if you fail in your mission, if you fail in your obligation, your responsibility, how many lives will it take to return this nation to freedom if it ever receives it again? How many years and lives will it cost? So many that I don't want to think about it. How many decades or centuries would it take to recover what it took us to create? What God had given to us as a gift? A long, bitter path, or even worse than the one we face right now. Winston Churchill probably said it best. I always abbreviate it nowadays. But of course, it starts out, if you will not fight when victory is easy, eventually you shall have to fight when victory is not possible at all, because it is better to perish than live as slaves. I see us with victory at hand, but victory still down a long road. If we do nothing else tonight and leave here, take care of your own needs first, and then prepare appropriately to deal with your community's needs when the time comes. Always vote. Don't ever tell somebody, Mark said don't vote. I voted in every election I possibly could, whenever I could. Use a write-in ballot. Choose independent people whenever possible. And don't vote if there's not somebody else that's offered in a line. But vote nonetheless because you are morally obligated to do it. Participate in government because, as Jefferson said, a man should only govern as far as he can see. And your townships and your communities are part of that government. And also participate in the militia. Be part of the militia. I don't care how old you are. I do not care how young you are. Hell, we're going to use you as long as rigor mortis hasn't set in. And if rigor mortis does set in, I'm putting wheels on and using you anyway. That's how it works. Now, what we're going to do when we leave here is we're going to challenge you. Because Mark isn't here every day. You are. I'm just simply a stranger traveling through many parts of the country, and hopefully we're going to make enough noise and wrap on enough heads and we wake some people up. When the time comes, you people decide victory, defeat for the United States. You, ladies and gentlemen, decide slavery or freedom. You decide when and where we fight. Many have asked me in the past, when do we make that decision? The first battle may be fought here. I would hope, and I pray to God that we are given more time, but it is not my place to decide that. And in my heart, I feel we do not have much time. Now, at some point, I'm going to fall. When I fall, this man's going to have to pick up the flag to replace me. One of you is going to have to pick up the flag after him. Yet another after that, and another after that when the time comes. It is a long, cold path perhaps for many of us. And I would not trade our positions with anybody. Not on any part of this planet. If I fall, who of you will pick up the flag and replace me? Thank you. You stand me up when rigor mortis sets in, and I'll do it right along with you. Well, I don't plan on it, and I pray to God that I'm there to see a victory when the time comes, but you've got good brothers and sisters. I've asked that question of all over Florida, and they've answered with the same resounding yes, and the rebel battle cry we've heard in the past in this nation. So, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, the Republic shall be preserved and shall not fall. I ask that you join with me in three last statements. Together, God bless the Republic! Death to the New World